Most people live their entire lives unaware that they are stuck in patterns they didn't consciously choose. They wake up each morning, go through their routines, respond to their environment, and fall asleep again, believing they are making free choices when, in truth, they are operating from scripts written by past experiences, fears, and emotional wounds. Owen Hermstring calls this the autopilot trap, and it is the invisible cage that holds even the most intelligent individuals hostage to mediocrity and repetition. What makes it dangerous is precisely its invisibility. It feels like life, but it's not living. It feels like choice, but it's programming. It feels like survival, but it's self-sabotage. Hermstring suggests that if you do not consciously reprogram your mind, then someone or something already did it for you. Your childhood, your past traumas, your culture, your environment, or your emotional disappointments. You don't wake up one day magically on autopilot. It happens slowly, subtly. A failure makes you cautious, a betrayal makes you guarded, a rejection makes you shrink. And each of those emotional experiences lays down a track in your subconscious, which becomes the silent command center of your life. You begin to choose safety over risk, approval over authenticity, and routine over purpose. And then you wonder why your life feels smaller than your dreams. The trap is so well camouflaged that we justify it with rational stories. I'm just practical, someone says, when really they are afraid to believe again. I'm just realistic, says another, when what they mean is I tried once and failed. We tell ourselves that we're not good at relationships, that success is for other people, that we're too old, too tired, or too busy. But Owen Hermstring dismantles those excuses by showing how each of these thoughts is not a truth. It's a program, and any program can be rewritten. There's a story in The Law Behind the Laws about a man named Caleb, who always found himself getting close to breakthrough, only to sabotage it in the final stretch. Promotions slipped through his fingers. Relationships broke down just when intimacy was growing. At first, he believed it was bad luck or that people didn't recognize his value. But through Hermstring's coaching, Caleb discovered that he had internalized a belief from childhood, that if he succeeded, he would outshine his father and make him feel small. That unconscious loyalty kept him playing small in his own life. Once that belief surfaced, everything changed. Caleb was able to grieve, release, and reprogram that script. He finally stepped into the success that had always been waiting for him, but that his autopilot had kept rejecting. This is the secret most people miss. You are not sabotaging yourself because you are weak, lazy, or unworthy. You are doing it because your subconscious mind believes it is protecting you. If you equate love with abandonment, you'll push away every good partner. If you equate success with guilt, you'll delay every opportunity. If you equate visibility with danger, you'll hide your talents. Your subconscious is not cruel. It is obedient. It carries out what it was taught, not what you now consciously desire. Breaking out of the autopilot trap is not about motivation or willpower. It's about awareness. You cannot change what you do not see. Hermstring writes that awareness is the beginning of liberation. You must become an observer of your life, not just a participant. Why do I keep ending up in this pattern? Why do I feel anxiety when things go well? Why do I hesitate right before the moment that matters? These are not signs of failure. They are invitations to uncover the script that is secretly directing your life. The journey out of autopilot is uncomfortable. The mind prefers the familiar, even if it's painful, over the unknown. That's why many people return to toxic relationships, sabotage new careers, or numb themselves with distractions. They are not addicted to pain, they are addicted to familiarity. But Hermstring reminds us that comfort is the enemy of growth, and that every transformation begins with disruption. You have to interrupt the old story. You have to become willing to live without the old excuses. You have to stop rehearsing your limitations. One powerful tool Hermstring offers is called pattern tracing. Take a journal and list your 3 most frustrating patterns in life: relationships, money, health, self-worth. Then go back to the earliest memory where that emotion or result showed up. What did you feel? What did you believe in that moment? That belief is still active in your subconscious unless you have intentionally rewritten it. Pattern tracing reveals that autopilot is not random. It is precise, predictable, and programmable. The ultimate truth is this: life does not change until your mind does. You can change cities, change partners, change jobs, even change your appearance. But if the mind behind those changes is still running on the same subconscious program, you will simply recreate your past in new forms. Real change is internal. Real change requires reprogramming. Hermstring ends the chapter with this powerful reminder: the mind on autopilot will always return to the place where it feels most familiar, not where it is most fulfilled. That is why transformation begins not with the world outside, but with the inner world of belief. If you are tired of reruns in your life, it's time to take back the remote. Your mind has been watching the same episode for too long. From the moment you are born, your mind is like a blank slate, wide open and deeply absorbent. You do not choose your first beliefs, your definitions of love, success, failure, or even identity. Instead, they are installed, quietly, repetitively, and often unconsciously, by your environment. Owen Hermstring refers to these unseen influences as the hidden programmers in the law behind the laws. They are not malicious by nature, but they are powerful, and they shape your internal operating system long before you have the capacity to question it. Understanding who and what these hidden programmers are is the first step in taking back control of your life. Your parents are the first and most significant programmers, not because they intend to limit you, but because they pass down what was passed to them. A child growing up in a home filled with scarcity doesn't learn just that money is tight. They learn that abundance is dangerous, that having too much might attract envy, or that success separates you from love. A parent who constantly worries implants the belief that the world is unsafe. A parent who praises achievement over presence teaches that love must be earned. These impressions are not taught through formal lessons. They are absorbed through tone, repetition, body language, and emotional climate. Hermstring emphasizes that children do not hear what adults say, they feel what adults embody. Then come the schools, the teachers, and the early peer groups. You are rewarded for compliance, not creativity. You are praised for right answers, not deep questions. You learn that being accepted means fitting in, not standing out. If you express too much confidence, you're arrogant. If you're too quiet, you're invisible. Slowly, the wild uniqueness of your soul is trimmed down to meet the standards of the system. By the time you reach adulthood, you've been shaped to seek validation more than truth. You may call it your personality, but it's really your programming. Media and culture are also major hidden programmers. From advertisements to television, from social media to celebrity narratives, you are constantly exposed to messages about what is valuable, desirable, or worthy of attention. Hermstring points out that your subconscious doesn't distinguish between fiction and reality. It simply stores what is repeated. If every love story you see ends in betrayal, your mind prepares for it. If every wealthy character is greedy or cruel, you may unconsciously resist financial success. Culture programs the parameters of your expectations, and your life rarely exceeds what your mind allows. There's also the role of emotional trauma, those sharp moments of pain that burn beliefs into your subconscious like branding irons. A single betrayal can program you to distrust love. One failure can convince you that you're not capable. A public embarrassment might create a lifetime of fear around being seen. Hermstring writes that trauma is not what happens to you. It's the meaning your subconscious assigns to what happens, and unless that meaning is challenged and rewritten, it becomes the code that dictates your future. What makes these hidden programmers so effective is that they operate through repetition, emotion, and authority. The brain is most programmable when a message is repeated often, delivered with emotional intensity, or comes from someone you perceive as powerful. Your subconscious isn't logical, it's impressionable. That's why a single angry statement from a parent, "You'll never be good enough," can echo for decades, even if they didn't mean it. That's why an early teacher's ridicule can create a lifelong fear of public speaking. It's not the event, it's the emotion. Hermstring introduces an exercise called the inventory of influence. He asks you to write down the 5 people or sources that shaped your core beliefs about money, love, success, and self-worth. Then you're asked a confronting question. Would you trade lives with them? If the answer is no, why are you still living by their scripts? This exercise reveals the power of inherited beliefs. You might be following rules written by people who were never free themselves. You may be repeating emotional patterns that don't belong to you. You may be loyal to pain that isn't even yours. But here's the liberating truth. What was programmed can be reprogrammed. Your mind is not fixed. It is adaptable. Just as beliefs were installed through repetition and emotion, they can be uninstalled the same way. Hermstring says, "The mind is a field, not a fortress. What you plant, it grows." That means you can begin to plant new associations. You can decide that love is safe, that success is a service, that being seen is a gift. You can begin to choose your programmers, mentors, books, spiritual teachers consciously. One of the most overlooked hidden programmers is your own inner voice, which often simply repeats what others said to you long ago. You think you are being self-critical, but you are merely echoing a voice that was never yours. You think you are protecting yourself, but you are really defending the beliefs of others. Once you recognize this, you are no longer the puppet, you become the puppeteer. Reprogramming your mind doesn't start with changing the world around you. It starts with changing what's inside of you. It begins when you stop reacting and start observing. When you pause before repeating the old narrative. When you question whether this fear, this hesitation, this excuse is truly yours, or if it was planted by someone who didn't know better. Awareness breaks the spell. Hermstring concludes this section with a powerful line. The greatest act of rebellion is to become conscious in a world that trained you to be asleep. You were programmed without your permission, but you can reclaim the code. You can become the architect of your own beliefs. And once you do, autopilot ends and true life begins. Most people don't realize they are stuck in a loop until life begins to feel eerily familiar, no matter how much time passes or how different the circumstances seem. You move to a new city, but end up in the same toxic job dynamic. You start a new relationship, but it begins to echo the wounds of the last one. You chase a new dream, but sabotage it at the last moment. Again, the pattern is subtle but persistent. Hermstring refers to this as a repeating script, a subconscious narrative quietly dictating your decisions, your reactions, and even your perceptions. Until you recognize these scripts, you will keep reliving them. Not because you want to, but because your mind is loyal to the familiar, even when it hurts. These scripts are not just metaphors, they're neural pathways carved deep by emotion and repetition. Think of them like tracks in the snow. The more you follow the same route, the deeper the path becomes. It becomes easier for the mind to default to what's been done before, even when new options are available. Hermstring explains that the brain is an efficiency machine. It doesn't care about your happiness, it cares about conserving energy. And repeating old emotional responses, behavioral habits, or belief structures is far less taxing than forging new ones. So how do you recognize your repeating scripts? One method Hermstring proposes is to follow the emotional echo. Start with your pain points. Where do you feel most frustrated, most exhausted, most helpless? Is it in love, money, self-worth? Then ask yourself, when was the first time I remember feeling this way? That question often takes you back to childhood or adolescence, key programming stages. If your adult life keeps making you feel like a powerless child, you're likely living out an unedited emotional script. Another powerful signal is emotional overreaction. When you respond to something minor with disproportionate emotion, tears, anger, panic, it's rarely about the current situation. It's about the unresolved wound underneath. The overreaction is a flare from your subconscious, alerting you that a core script is being triggered. Hermstring writes, "The script repeats not to punish you, but to invite your awareness. Every trigger is a clue, not an enemy. Patterns also show up in the people you attract and the roles you play. If you always find yourself being the fixer, the abandoned one, the black sheep, the overachiever, or the invisible one, you're not just experiencing life. You're casting yourself in a role based on your script. These roles become identities. You begin to say things like, I'm just the kind of person who, without realizing that who you are, has been shaped by what you've repeatedly survived. You may believe your personality is fixed, but often it's simply your coping strategy in disguise. Hermstring encourages readers to track their history like a detective. Write down every major disappointment or recurring issue you've faced, then look for the common thread, not the surface details, but the emotional theme. Maybe it's rejection, maybe it's betrayal, maybe it's being overlooked, misunderstood, or controlled. When you discover the emotional theme, you've found your script. That's the invisible story your subconscious keeps trying to resolve, even if it means dragging you through familiar pain again and again. One of the most jarring realizations is that you often recreate the environment of your original wound, not because you want to suffer, but because your subconscious is trying to win this time. If a parent made you feel unseen, you may unconsciously attract partners who ignore you, hoping to finally feel chosen. If you were shamed for being ambitious, you may surround yourself with people who mock your goals, so you can prove them wrong. But Hermstring warns, your subconscious isn't looking for healing. It's looking for resolution inside the same framework. That's why the pattern doesn't end until you change the script. Breaking the script begins with identification, not action. You cannot shift what you cannot see. That's why many people jump from one job, city, or relationship to another without real change, because they never pause to examine what internal loop they're stuck inside. Awareness, though uncomfortable, is liberation. Once you name the pattern, it begins to lose its power. You no longer react blindly, you respond with intention. Hermstring offers a mantra for interrupting the pattern. This feels familiar, which means I must choose differently. That moment of choice is where the pattern begins to unravel. You stop calling your pain fate. You stop blaming the world for what you unconsciously repeat. You stop defending a version of yourself that was built for survival, not for joy. It's also essential to remove the shame around the script. Everyone has one. The most successful people are not those without trauma, but those who learn to see their script and write a new one. Hermstring reminds us, the old script is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. You didn't choose the wound, but you can choose the healing. You can stop rehearsing the same story and begin composing a new one where your worth is not conditional, your identity is not reactive, and your future is not a replica of your past. The most empowering part of recognizing your repeating script is realizing that it's not written in stone, it's written in sand. And with awareness, compassion, and choice, you can wipe it clean. The patterns were never meant to trap you, they were meant to awaken you. Once you see them, you are no longer a character in a recycled narrative. You become the author. Once you recognize the repeating script, the next step is often the hardest, breaking it. Awareness without action is like seeing a locked door and never trying the handle. Your patterns will not dissolve on their own. They are far too familiar, far too rehearsed. In The Law Behind the Laws, Owen Hermstring emphasizes that lasting transformation is not just about what you know, but about what you do when the old programming wants to take the lead again. The autopilot doesn't shut off just because you're aware of it. You must override it, consciously, repeatedly, and with intention. The first practical step Hermstring recommends is creating a daily disruption. This means introducing a small conscious interruption to your usual behavior every single day. Not a radical change, but a meaningful one. If your pattern is people-pleasing, say no to something small. If your pattern is avoidance, initiate a difficult conversation. If your pattern is staying quiet, speak up even when your voice shakes. These tiny disruptions send a signal to your subconscious that a new script is being rehearsed. The key is consistency. Small daily changes become neural rewiring. But before you can act differently, you must learn to pause. Hermstring calls this the sacred second. It's that brief, often invisible space between trigger and reaction. Most people miss it because the reaction comes so fast it feels automatic. But if you learn to locate that micro-moment, you gain access to a different outcome. It sounds simple, but it's a skill. To stop, breathe, and ask, is this a replay of my script or a response to the present? That one question creates room for a new behavior to emerge. Next is what Hermstring calls pattern tracking. For 2 weeks, write down every time you feel activated, emotionally triggered, frustrated, afraid, ashamed. Then, beside each entry, describe your automatic thought, emotion, and behavior. You'll start to see clear links. For example, I felt rejected when my colleague didn't reply to my message. I thought I must have done something wrong. I withdrew and didn't follow up. By tracking these patterns in real time, you begin to build a map of your subconscious programming. And once you can map it, you can reroute it. Hermstring warns, though, that breaking the loop is not about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming who you were before the script took over. Most scripts are defense mechanisms, designed to protect a younger, vulnerable version of you. But what protected you then is now limiting you. That's why emotional regulation is a foundational practice in reprogramming. You must teach your nervous system that it's safe to choose differently. that you won't die if you disappoint someone, if you take up space, if you try and fail. One powerful tool Hermstring suggests is a visualization technique called the rewrite. When you identify a painful memory that created your script, close your eyes and revisit it, not to relive the pain, but to rewrite your response. In your mind, give your younger self what they didn't receive: safety, validation, agency. Let them speak up. Let them walk away. Let them be loved. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagined and real experiences. By reimagining those key moments, you soften the emotional charge around them and begin to script a different future. Accountability is another critical layer. Patterns thrive in secrecy. Bring one trusted person into the loop, not to fix you, but to witness your process. Hermstring writes, "Shame dies in the presence of empathy." Having someone who can reflect your growth and call out your patterns without judgment accelerates the rewiring. Choose someone emotionally mature, ideally not enmeshed in the patterns you're trying to change. There's also a somatic layer to breaking the loop. Your body remembers what your mind forgets. When you're triggered, you may feel heat in your chest, tightness in your throat, or a sinking in your stomach. Don't override these sensations. Use them as guides. They are the body's language, telling you where the script is stored. Movement, breathwork, and even physical shaking can release emotional energy stuck in the body. Hermstring calls this the body's exhale, a way to make space for a new response, not just mentally, but physiologically. One of the most misunderstood aspects of reprogramming is relapse. You will fall back into the old script. That's not failure, it's feedback. Each relapse reveals what part of the pattern still has power. Hermstring insists that regression is not the enemy of progress, it's the test of your commitment. What matters is how quickly you return to awareness. Over time, your recovery window shrinks. What used to take weeks to recognize now takes hours. Eventually, it takes seconds. That's how mastery begins. Language also plays a crucial role. Start speaking differently about yourself. Replace self-deprecating jokes with statements of truth. Instead of, "I always mess this up," say, "I'm learning how to do this better." Instead of, "That's just who I am," say that's who I've been, but I'm evolving. Words are not just expressions, they're blueprints. Your subconscious listens and believes. Lastly, Hermstring invites readers to ritualize their rewiring, make it sacred. Create a morning practice that anchors you into the new script. Meditation, journaling, affirmations, or even reading a passage from the law behind the laws. Let it remind you daily that you are not your pattern, you are not your pain, you are the consciousness choosing a new experience. Breaking the loop is not a one-time event, it's a lifestyle. It requires grace, grit, and an unwavering commitment to becoming who you truly are. The old script will try to seduce you back. It will promise comfort, familiarity, even love, but comfort is not the same as freedom. And familiarity is not the same as truth. You are not here to replay the story. You are here to rewrite it. The mind never stops speaking. Even when you're alone in silence, your inner world is filled with commentary. Some supportive, most critical. But have you ever stopped to ask, who exactly is narrating your life? According to Owen Hermstring in The Law Behind the Laws, the voice you think is you is often a carefully programmed script, an echo of past authority figures, childhood wounds, social expectations, and unconscious fears. Until you examine who's truly speaking in your mind, you will live as the actor of someone else's script. Your inner narrator is powerful because it shapes your identity moment by moment. It tells you what you're allowed to want, how far you're allowed to go, what kind of love you deserve, and whether you belong. If your narrator constantly whispers, "You always mess up," then you will sabotage even your best efforts just to stay consistent with the story. The tragedy, as Hermstring points out, is that most people never update that inner voice. They let a scared 5-year-old, a bitter parent, or a disappointed teacher dictate the tone of their adult life. This is not just poetic metaphor. It's neuroscience. Your brain operates through networks of repeated thoughts. The more often you think a certain belief, the more your neurons wire together to make it feel true. The brain doesn't care whether the thought is helpful or harmful. It only cares whether it's familiar. So if your inner narrator says, "People always leave," your subconscious will seek out experiences that confirm that belief, because familiarity feels safe, even when it hurts. Hermstring introduces a concept called voice mapping. He invites readers to journal for 7 days, capturing the exact phrases their mind repeats in moments of doubt, fear, or stress. Then, beside each phrase, ask, whose voice is this? When did I first hear it? What experience made it feel true? This process is not about blame. It's about recognition. It's about seeing that the voice inside you was installed by someone who may not have understood your soul, your dreams, or your worth. For many, the inner narrator is a parental voice, especially one rooted in conditional love. You're only lovable if you achieve. You're only safe if you're quiet. Others carry the voice of early rejection. You're too much. You'll never be enough. Hermstring emphasizes that these voices are not truth, they are trauma. They are defense mechanisms disguised as guidance, and the longer you let them drive, the farther you drift from who you truly are. So how do you reclaim your narrative? It begins with separation. You must realize that the voice is not you. You are the one hearing the voice. That single insight, simple but profound, creates the space for change. Hermstring calls this becoming the observer. Instead of reacting to every internal criticism, you pause and say, interesting. That's the script talking again. Just that awareness starts to break the trance. But awareness alone isn't enough. You must also give the inner narrator a new script. This is where Hermstring introduces the practice of voice rewriting. Each time you catch a limiting thought, write it down, then directly challenge it. For example, you always fail. I've failed before, but I've also grown. This time I bring new wisdom. You don't deserve love. Everyone deserves love, including me, especially me. You're not ready. No one ever feels fully ready. I'll grow as I go. At first this feels awkward, almost fake. That's because your old narrator has had decades of rehearsal. Your new voice is like a beginner picking up an instrument. It sounds off-key, but with repetition, it strengthens. Hermstring writes, every time you speak with kindness to yourself, you are not lying. You are restoring the truth that was buried. Another powerful tool he recommends is voice embodiment. This means connecting your new narrator to your body. Say your new beliefs out loud in front of a mirror with your full voice. Stand tall. Make eye contact with yourself. This might sound uncomfortable, but that's the point. The body holds the old narrator's fear. Reclaiming your posture, your tone, your presence. This rewires not just your mind, but your physiology. You're no longer just thinking differently. You're becoming someone new. Hermstring also suggests identifying your true voice, a calm, wise presence beneath the noise. It's not the loudest voice. It's often quiet, almost imperceptible. But you know it when you feel it. It speaks in clarity, not confusion. It encourages rather than condemns. It guides instead of punishes. He encourages readers to cultivate this voice through meditation, silence, prayer, or deep writing. The more you connect with this core self, the less you'll tolerate the harsh inner monologue. Finally, Hermstring reminds us that your inner narrator will always evolve, but only if you stay conscious. Life will try to install new scripts. Social media, advertising, critics, even well-meaning loved ones will offer you lines to recite. But you must ask always, does this voice align with my truth, my healing, my wholeness? If not, you have permission to reject it. You are not obligated to carry the voice of anyone who tried to break you. You are not required to believe every thought your mind generates. You have the right and the responsibility to curate your inner dialogue, because at the end of the day, the story you tell yourself is the life you will live. And once you take back the pen, everything can change. One of the greatest illusions in modern personal development is the belief that motivation must come first, that somehow you need to feel ready before taking action. This idea is so deeply ingrained that most people wait their entire lives for the right moment, the spark, the sign, the wave of inspiration that finally gets them moving. But as Owen Hermstring reveals in The Law Behind the Laws, motivation is not the spark, it's the smoke. It comes after action, not before. And the longer you wait to feel ready, the more you condition your nervous system to associate action with fear. This is why so many big dreams remain trapped in notebooks and vision boards. People assume that readiness is an emotional state, when in fact it's a decision. Hermstring writes, motivation is the reward the body gives for acting in alignment with your higher self. It's not a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. In other words, Waiting to feel motivated is like standing in front of a cold fireplace and saying, "Give me heat, and then I'll give you wood." That's not how it works. The fire comes after you commit. What really keeps us waiting isn't laziness. It's fear disguised as logic. The mind says, "It's not the right time," or "I'm not skilled enough yet," or "I need more clarity." These sound reasonable, but dig deeper, and you'll find a fear of failure, judgment, or discomfort. Hermstring calls this the stall loop, a psychological loop where you confuse preparation with progress. You consume books, courses, videos, thinking it's forward movement, but without action, you're just rehearsing avoidance. To break free, Hermstring introduces the concept of micro-commitments. These are tiny, specific actions you take before you feel ready, designed to signal to your subconscious that movement is safe. Instead of saying, "I'll launch my business when I have a full plan," you say, "Today I'll buy the domain." Instead of, "I'll start the book when I feel inspired," you say, "I'll write one paragraph, even if it's bad." The key is to lower the bar of entry so much that your inner resistance has no excuse left. The beauty of micro-commitments is that they create what Hermstring calls momentum echoes. When you complete one small action, your brain releases dopamine, not because you achieved greatness, but because you honored a promise to yourself. That tiny chemical reward becomes a thread of evidence that you are someone who moves. And that identity shift, repeated daily, becomes more powerful than any motivational video. Another myth Hermstring dismantles is the idea that you need confidence to begin. He argues that confidence is a result, not a requirement. You gain it through experience, not contemplation. Waiting to feel confident is like waiting to become a great swimmer by standing on the edge of the pool. You only learn by jumping in, by doing scared, by doing imperfectly. Action doesn't wait for clarity, he writes. Action creates clarity. This concept is echoed in neuroscience. When you act despite fear, your brain forms new pathways that associate courage with safety. Over time, your nervous system learns that discomfort is not danger, it's expansion. But if you only act when you feel comfortable, your brain learns the opposite, that the unknown must be avoided, and thus your world shrinks, your possibilities narrow, and your dreams become ghosts. Hermstring also highlights the emotional trap of perfectionism. Many people claim they're not ready because they want to do it right. But perfectionism, he explains, is just fear in a tuxedo. It looks noble, but it's rooted in the belief that your worth is tied to flawless execution. To break this, he suggests a radical reframe. Let it be messy, not reckless, but raw, real, human. Your first draft, your first launch, your first step will be embarrassing, he says. Good. That means you're no longer hiding. There's also the societal pressure to appear in control. We're taught that confident people never hesitate, but Hermstring reveals a deeper truth. Truly confident people aren't fearless. They're just more committed to movement than they are to comfort. They act even when their hands shake. They speak even when their voice cracks. They trust that something wiser will emerge through action. They understand the law behind the laws. Life rewards those who move. To practice this, Hermstring invites readers to set a daily non-negotiable. It's one action, however small, that you will take every day toward your dream, regardless of mood, fear, or outcome. This builds what he calls inner reliability. When you become someone who honors your own word, not to others but to yourself, you become unstoppable, not because you feel powerful, but because you're no longer enslaved by the illusion of readiness. One of the most powerful ideas in this chapter is that waiting costs you more than time. It costs you identity. Every day you wait, you reinforce the belief that you're not someone who creates, leads, dares, and slowly you become the shadow of the person you were meant to be, not because you lacked potential, but because you believed the lie that readiness was something external. In closing, Hermstring urges us to reframe the idea of fear itself. He writes, "Fear is not a stop sign. It's a green light. It means you're facing the edge of who you've been and who you could become. When you stop waiting and start acting, even trembling, you reclaim your power. You prove to your nervous system that you are not a victim of emotion, but a leader of action. And once you move from that place, motivation arrives, not as a requirement, but as a celebration." Most people walk into adulthood believing they've left their childhood behind. They assume that their decisions, their behaviors, their relationships are formed by logic, maturity, and independence. But Owen Hermstring argues otherwise. In The Law Behind the Laws, he states clearly, you are not reacting to the present, you are reenacting the past. The blueprint for how you respond to life was not drawn in your 20s, it was etched into your emotional nervous system when you were 5, 7, or 9 years old. And unless you consciously reprogram it, it will silently control everything you choose. This is the emotional blueprint, the invisible script of associations, beliefs, and emotional triggers that were wired into your body long before you had language to name them. It's the reason some people sabotage love, avoid success, or shrink from opportunity. It's not because they don't want joy. It's because their blueprint doesn't know how to hold it. As Hermstring puts it, we do not reject abundance. We reject unfamiliarity, and often abundance feels more unfamiliar than struggle. Take, for example, someone who grew up in a home where affection was conditional, where love had to be earned by pleasing others, performing, or staying quiet. That child learns that safety is tied to compliance, not authenticity. Fast forward 20 years, and they're in a relationship, but every time they try to express their needs, they feel guilt. Every time they stand their ground, they fear rejection. Why? Because the blueprint says, to be loved, I must disappear. Hermstring explains that our emotional blueprint is not stored in memory, it's stored in the body. It shows up as tension in the chest when speaking up, as stomach knots before a risk, as chronic fatigue after making progress. It's the nervous system trying to keep you within the limits it learned were safe long ago. We don't fear failure, he writes. We fear what failure represented when we were vulnerable. That a mistake meant disapproval. That imperfection meant abandonment. And this is why affirmations, positive thinking, or intellectual advice often don't work. You can't overwrite a somatic blueprint with mental sentences. The body doesn't speak in language, it speaks in pattern. You have to go into the pattern and teach it something new. Hermstring calls this reparenting the nervous system. It's not about blaming your parents or reliving trauma. It's about gently teaching your body that what was once unsafe is now survivable, and that it no longer has to freeze, flee, or fawn. One of the most profound techniques Hermstring introduces is the practice of emotional rehearsal. Instead of waiting for a trigger to expose your blueprint, you bring the scenario to mind intentionally in a safe space. Let's say you're terrified of being seen. In private, you close your eyes, imagine yourself speaking in public, and observe the physical reaction. Your chest tightens, your breath shortens. That's the old blueprint activating. But instead of judging it, you breathe through it, gently, slowly, reminding your body, I'm not that child anymore. I'm safe now. Over time, this creates what he calls micro-trauma resolutions. Each time you enter the pattern and stay grounded, you unpair the emotion from the memory. You uncouple the past from the present. And eventually the body learns that the future doesn't have to be a replay. Another core concept is the loyalty loop. Hermstring explains that many people unconsciously stay loyal to the emotional states of their childhood because it feels like betraying their caregivers to outgrow them. If your home was filled with scarcity, you might feel guilt for earning more. If your parents struggled in love, you might fear being happy in a relationship. Not because you're broken, but because you associate suffering with belonging. To break the loyalty loop, Hermstring suggests writing a new contract with your younger self, literally. He advises readers to write a letter to the inner child that says, you don't have to carry this anymore, I've got you now, you can play, I will protect us, I will lead us. This might sound poetic, but neuroscience backs it up. When you bring language and presence to a memory that was once wordless and chaotic, you integrate it. You pull it out of the limbic system and into conscious control. He also warns of the trap of emotional familiarity. We often choose relationships, jobs, and environments that feel like home, not because they're healthy, but because they're known. If you grew up with unpredictability, calmness might feel boring. If you knew chaos, stability might feel suffocating. So we chase what we recognize, not what we need. Healing, Hermstring writes, is not just letting go of pain. It's grieving the comfort you once found in dysfunction. Reprogramming the emotional blueprint requires what Hermstring calls compassionate interruption. When the old pattern activates, you notice it, but instead of shaming yourself, you pause. You breathe. You say, "Ah, there you are. Thank you for trying to protect me, but we're doing it differently now." That one moment of conscious interception changes the future, because now you're at the wheel, not the blueprint. In essence, Hermstring is teaching us to become the parent we never had, not just intellectually, but emotionally, somatically, spiritually. To hold the trembling inner child in moments of adult fear and whisper, "You're not alone this time. We're safe, we're free, and we're not going backwards." Once you recognize that every choice you make today is echoing a feeling from years ago, you stop reacting and start relating. You ask, whose voice is this? Whose rule am I following? What age am I acting from? And then you choose again. Not from fear, but from truth. That's the moment the blueprint begins to dissolve. And in that space, between the old pattern and the new choice, you are no longer living on autopilot. You are living awake. Most people believe change is an internal process. They assume that if they read enough, meditate enough, or repeat enough affirmations, transformation will follow. But as Owen Hermstring emphasizes in The Law Behind the Laws, the environment is not just background, it's the blueprint's playground. Your external world is not neutral. It speaks to your nervous system in a language older than words. And until you understand this, your past will keep repeating, not because you haven't changed, but because your context hasn't. Every environment carries an emotional residue, Hermstring writes. Your nervous system remembers places even when your mind forgets. The couch where you used to numb your emotions with TV, the neighborhood that silently reminds you of your childhood fears, the room where you used to overextend yourself for validation. These spaces are not empty. They're energetic mirrors of who you were. And unless consciously interrupted, they will keep pulling you into patterns you've outgrown. Take relationships, for example. Hermstring notes that we often choose friends, partners, or colleagues not because they align with our highest self, but because they resonate with our unhealed self. A partner who criticizes you like a parent once did. A boss who withholds approval just like the teacher you never pleased. A friend who always makes you the helper, never the one helped. You don't stay because it feels good. You stay because it feels familiar. And the body confuses familiarity with safety. Hermstring calls these emotional anchors. They are subtle but powerful forces that keep us tethered to outdated versions of ourselves. You might spend hours journaling about freedom, but still feel frozen in the presence of a certain person. Why? Because they reflect back an identity you're trying to leave. You cannot grow beyond who you're required to be in someone's presence, he warns. That one sentence becomes a mirror. Who are you shrinking for? This is why environment is not just decor, it's identity reinforcement. The books on your shelf, the apps on your phone, the photos on your wall, the energy of your bedroom. Every object, every person, every routine is a subtle vote for who you're becoming or who you're staying. Hermstring writes, the subconscious doesn't read words, it reads symbols, and your environment is filled with symbols. A cluttered room says, you're overwhelmed. A blocked calendar says, you don't matter. A toxic circle says, you're not allowed to change. One of the most radical tools Hermstring offers is the concept of energetic redesign. It goes beyond minimalism. It's about consciously curating every space and relationship to reflect your future self, not your past self. He invites readers to walk through their home and ask, does this space belong to the person I'm becoming? If the answer is no, something must shift. Not because material things change you, but because they signal permission to change. This also applies to digital environments. Your social media feed is an emotional ecosystem. Who you follow, what you scroll through, what content you consume, it all becomes your energetic diet. Hermstring urges readers to unfollow anything that reinforces their old identity or triggers their unhealed wounds. You cannot reprogram your mind while bathing it in old scripts, he writes. In other words, don't expect new beliefs to take root in an emotional climate of contradiction. Sometimes the trigger isn't a thing, it's a place. Returning to your hometown, visiting your childhood church, sitting at a dinner table where you once silenced yourself. These moments awaken not logic but muscle memory. You suddenly feel younger, smaller, more reactive. That's not regression, it's retrieval. Your body is trying to tell you something. There's a version of you still living here. Are you ready to bring them home? Hermstring calls this phenomenon time loops. It's when the past hijacks the present and convinces you that nothing has changed. And unless you pause and witness it with awareness, you'll believe the loop is real. But here's the truth. You are not who you were. And the loop isn't destiny, it's data. It shows you where healing still lives. So how do you break free from environmental triggers? First, Hermstring suggests a period of sacred distance, not isolation, but intentional space from the people, places, and patterns that pull you back. It's not about cutting ties with cruelty, it's about reclaiming clarity. When you remove the stimulus, you meet yourself. You hear your own voice, and you begin to discern what's truly yours and what was merely inherited. Second, he recommends the practice of symbolic reversal. If a chair was where you used to dissociate, sit there with full presence. If a mirror once showed you shame, stand before it and speak truth. If a room was once filled with hiding, turn it into a space for creation. You don't have to run from your past. You can redeem it. You don't heal by avoiding the places you were hurt, Hermstring writes. You heal by becoming someone powerful in those places. Finally, he urges readers to build altars, not religious ones, but symbolic ones. Corners of your life that represent who you are becoming. A vision board, a sacred notebook, a playlist of your future. A candle lit for the version of you that chose growth. The subconscious follows repetition and reverence, Hermstring notes. Make your environment a shrine to your evolution. Ultimately, the spaces you inhabit should not just house your body. They should support your becoming, and the people in your life should not just accept your presence. They should celebrate your expansion. You are not meant to shrink to fit your environment. You are meant to reshape your environment to fit your soul. Because reprogramming your mind is not just about rewiring thoughts, it's about renovating the world you walk through. The autopilot stops, not when you change what you know, but when you change what you allow to surround you. We live in a world obsessed with motivation. From morning routines to productivity hacks, we are constantly seeking the next surge of energy that will finally get us to act. But as Owen Hermstring explains in The Law Behind the Laws, motivation is a myth when viewed as a long-term strategy. It's unreliable, inconsistent, and often driven by fear or ego. The real shift begins not when we increase our willpower, but when we remove the resistance that keeps us from moving naturally toward what we desire. Motivation is a bandage on a blocked river, Hermstring writes. It's not the current, it's the fight against the dam. In other words, most people don't lack desire, they lack access. Their energy doesn't flow because it's trapped in internal conflict, trauma, and outdated beliefs. They try to force themselves into forward motion, but subconsciously something inside is still pulling the brakes, and that friction is what drains their spirit. Think about it. How many times have you set a goal only to sabotage it days later? Not because you didn't want it, but because part of you didn't feel safe wanting it. This is where Hermstring introduces one of the most powerful ideas in his work. Internal contradiction is the real killer of dreams, not laziness, not distraction, not lack of discipline, but the invisible war between the part of you that dreams and the part of you that fears what the dream might cost. He explains that every goal we set activates two selves, the expansive self, which is driven by possibility, and the protective self, which is rooted in survival. If you haven't healed your relationship with worthiness, success may feel dangerous. If you've been punished for standing out, visibility may feel threatening. If love was conditional, receiving freely may trigger guilt. These contradictions don't make you weak, they make you human, but if left unchecked, they turn your goals into emotional landmines. This is why Hermstring insists you don't need more push, you need to clear the pullback. The resistance you feel isn't random, it's intelligent, it's a signal. It points to the places in your nervous system where permission has not yet been granted. Motivation is borrowed energy, he writes. But when resistance is removed, momentum becomes your default. Let's break this down. Imagine trying to drive with the parking brake on. You can push the gas all you want. You can shout affirmations and visualize the destination, but the car won't go far, and the effort will exhaust you. That's how most people approach their dreams. They assume struggle is part of the journey, but Hermstring turns this belief upside down. He suggests that ease is not a luxury. It's a sign of alignment. One of the most practical tools he shares is called the resistance map. You list your desires, then explore what fear, shame, guilt, or doubt is attached to each one. Want more money? Maybe you fear becoming greedy or being judged. Want love? Maybe you don't feel lovable. Want freedom? Maybe it triggers memories of abandonment. When you identify the resistance, you stop fighting yourself. You begin working with your mind, not against it. This shifts everything. You no longer chase external motivation. You heal the inner noise that made action feel unsafe in the first place. Hermstring writes, "True drive doesn't require force. It arises when you stop apologizing for your power." This means the real question is not, how do I stay motivated, but where am I still not free to be fully me? He also warns against becoming addicted to motivational content. It can feel good temporarily, but it often bypasses the deeper work. Don't confuse adrenaline with alignment, he says. Many people mistake emotional spikes for spiritual breakthroughs. They ride the wave for a while, then crash harder. Real transformation is quieter. It feels less like a firework and more like a silent unlocking. Another key point is about emotional debts. Hermstring describes them as subconscious contracts we've made that drain our energy. For example, you may feel obligated to succeed so your parents can be proud, or you may avoid success because it would separate you from your struggling friends. These emotional debts create resistance because your nervous system is trying to protect belonging, not just progress. To release these debts, he encourages a process of energetic forgiveness, not toward others but toward yourself. Forgive yourself for not being ready sooner, for playing small, for choosing comfort over growth, not as a punishment, but as a path to reclaiming your full energy. Every act of self-forgiveness frees up bandwidth for your destiny, Hermstring writes. It's not about forgetting the past. It's about not letting the past run the system anymore. By the end of the chapter, you realize willpower was never the problem. The illusion of motivation dissolves, and you're left with something deeper, natural movement. The kind of energy that flows not because you're pushing, but because you're no longer blocking. The river is open. So if your big dreams have felt stuck, maybe it's time to stop forcing them. Maybe it's time to ask, what would change if I stopped resisting who I'm becoming? What if you stopped trying to motivate yourself into movement and started trusting the natural momentum that emerges when you finally stop resisting? The answers won't always come loud, but they will come, in stillness, in safety, in self-trust, and in the quiet certainty that you were never lazy. You are just learning how to set yourself free. Most people assume their first thought is their real thought, that the voice that speaks loudest in their mind is the most authentic. But as Owen Hermstring reveals in The Law Behind the Laws, this assumption is one of the most damaging illusions that keeps people trapped in cycles of fear, failure, and hesitation. Not all thoughts are yours, Hermstring states. Some are echoes, some are ghosts. Some are just old code running on your nervous system. He introduces a profound distinction between programming and intuition. Programming is what you've been taught to believe by parents, culture, religion, past trauma, or unresolved shame. Intuition, on the other hand, is what your inner being knows. It's not loud, it doesn't argue, it doesn't operate through urgency. It's the whisper beneath the noise, the quiet clarity that doesn't beg to be right, because it already is. The danger lies in how easily programming masquerades as intuition, especially when it's wrapped in emotion. For instance, you might feel an intense fear about a decision and interpret that as a sign you shouldn't proceed. But Hermstring explains that many of our emotional reactions are not based on truth. They're based on triggers. And triggers are often fragments of old experiences stored in the body, not reflections of the present. Your nervous system doesn't care about your dreams, he writes. It only cares about your safety. If it had to choose between your expansion and your familiarity, it will choose familiarity every time. This means your first thought, especially if it's reactive, might actually be your programming trying to maintain its grip, not your soul trying to guide you. Let's take an example. You're offered an opportunity that excites you, but your first thought is, I'm not ready. That voice feels real. It sounds like you, but if you slow down and examine it, you might notice it's not coming from your deeper self. It might be coming from a moment when you were criticized as a child, or from a belief you internalized after a failure. It might not be a truth, just a pattern. Hermstring emphasizes this with a powerful phrase, your true self doesn't panic. Intuition may warn you, but it won't scream. It may redirect you, but it won't humiliate you. It speaks from groundedness, not fear. That's why learning to distinguish between programming and intuition is not just useful, it's essential. Without this skill, you may be obeying voices in your head that were never meant to lead you. One of the most transformative exercises he offers is called the second voice practice. Every time you hear a thought, especially a strong or emotional one, you pause and ask, is this the first voice or the second voice? The first voice is often programming. It's fast, familiar, conditioned. The second voice comes after stillness. It's softer, wiser, and often says something surprising, something that expands you rather than confines you. For example, first voice, you'll embarrass yourself if you try. Second voice, even if you fall, you'll grow stronger. First voice, no one cares what you have to say. Second voice, your story might save someone else. This inner dialogue reveals the difference between survival and soul. And once you become fluent in the language of your second voice, life becomes less chaotic. Decisions become less anxious. Your path becomes clearer, not because it's perfect, but because it finally feels aligned. Hermstring also explains that society rewards programming. Most systems are built to reinforce obedience, not intuition. Schools teach memorization. Religions teach hierarchy. Media teaches fear. Social norms teach shame. So by the time we're adults, we're fluent in the voice of programming and almost deaf to the voice of intuition. Reclaiming that inner voice requires a kind of unlearning, not just of what you were taught, but of who you were told you had to be. One of the most emotionally powerful sections in this topic comes when Hermstring addresses the idea of inherited programming. Sometimes your first thought isn't even your thought. It's your father's anxiety, your mother's insecurity, your culture's limitation, and it's been living in your mind like it belongs there. When you realize this, you stop taking every thought personally. You begin filtering, you become discerning, and in that discernment you start to hear yourself again. But this isn't a process of blaming the past. It's a process of reclaiming presence. Your programming may have been necessary once. It may have kept you safe, helped you belong, or allowed you to survive pain. But survival strategies become prisons when they are never questioned. And questioning doesn't mean rebellion. It means restoration. Restoration of the truth beneath the noise. To develop a relationship with your intuition, Hermstring recommends stillness, not productivity, not research, not talking to 5 people, just stillness. Intuition rises in silence, he writes. It doesn't compete with the world. It waits for you to return to yourself. He describes intuition as an ancient friend, one who has been waiting patiently beneath all the programming just to be heard again. In that silence, you might hear something simple. You are already ready. You are already enough. You are already home. And that single voice, so gentle, so clear, can shift your entire trajectory, because once you trust your true voice, you no longer need to be convinced. You no longer need permission. You no longer need to be saved. You only need to listen. Not louder, but deeper. Resistance is not always rebellion. Sometimes it's loyalty in disguise. This is one of the most eye-opening revelations Owen Hermstring delivers in The Law Behind the Laws. He explains that what we call self-sabotage, procrastination, or even fear of success, isn't always about laziness or confusion. It's about protection. More specifically, it's about remaining loyal to old identities, old beliefs, and old emotional contracts that you never realized you made. Hermstring writes, "You don't resist your evolution because you don't want it. You resist because you're still trying to honor a version of you who wouldn't know how to survive in it." This statement strikes deep. Think about that. What if your greatest delays are not signs of failure, but signs of emotional fidelity, a subconscious devotion to who you used to be, or who you were told to be? Let's look at an example. You want to step into leadership, but something keeps pulling you back. It's not a lack of skill, it's not even fear of rejection. It might be loyalty to a past self who was taught to stay small to avoid being targeted. Or perhaps you want to create wealth, but you keep sabotaging your finances. It might be unconscious loyalty to a parent who struggled their whole life and wore financial hardship as a badge of morality. Hermstring explains that resistance is rarely random. It always protects something. And until you uncover what you're protecting, you'll keep repeating the same loops no matter how hard you push forward. He calls these hidden contracts the invisible oaths of survival. These are the subconscious promises you made as a child, as a teenager, or even during trauma. Promises like, I'll never outshine my sibling. I won't be happier than my parents were. If I'm too visible, I'll get hurt. Success means abandonment. These beliefs are rarely spoken, but they live in your nervous system, and as long as they remain active, they'll override even your strongest intentions. This is why Hermstring warns, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you're still loyal to. If you're loyal to limitation, to guilt or to pain, you'll unconsciously build your life around it, even while consciously trying to break free. So, how do you change that? Not by brute force, not by willpower, but by witnessing. You have to slow down and ask, what part of me is afraid of getting what I want? What or who am I still trying to protect? One of Hermstring's most powerful techniques is the loyalty letter. You write a letter, not to a person but to an identity, the younger you, the wounded you, the people pleaser, the overachiever, the one who survived betrayal or silence. In that letter, you thank them for how they protected you. You acknowledge their role, and then you release them. You tell them it's safe to evolve, that you can carry the wisdom without carrying the weight. This symbolic act of emotional permission often breaks chains that years of strategy couldn't. Because resistance doesn't need more effort, it needs understanding. And Hermstring is clear on this point. Your struggle is sacred data. Listen to it before you try to override it. He also explores how resistance can be a mirror. Sometimes you resist, not because you fear failure, but because you fear becoming someone that threatens your current relationships. If everyone around you is used to you being the caretaker, or the broke one, or the joker, success may jeopardize that role. So subconsciously, you stay where you are, not because it's right, but because it's relationally safe. This is why transformation often brings grief, not because you're losing your truth, but because you're releasing the bonds that kept you emotionally connected to your past. Hermstring calls it the grief of evolution, and in this grief, you'll notice what you were still trying to protect, your old self-image, your old dynamics, even your illusions of control. In a profound passage, he writes, you can't expand and hide at the same time. So if you're stuck, ask yourself, what part of me still believes hiding is love? This question opens a floodgate of awareness. You begin to see how many of your patterns weren't about resistance, they were about care. Misplaced, yes, but real. You were trying to stay connected, stay humble, stay loyal, but at what cost? To release resistance, then, is to honor your past self, but refuse to be confined by them. You don't heal by rejecting who you were. You heal by updating the contract. You show that it's safe to grow, that safety and visibility can coexist, that power and softness can live together. That evolution does not mean abandonment. It means integration. And in that act of integration, something shifts. Resistance becomes less sticky, less paralyzing. You begin to move with less fear and more clarity, because now you're not just chasing goals, you're honoring truth. You're not just pushing through, you're listening, loving, and letting go. The transformation becomes less about force and more about trust, and when you begin to trust yourself at this level, your energy aligns, not in bursts, not temporarily, but deeply, consistently, and sustainably. That's when your small wins stop feeling accidental. They become the baseline, because the inner war has ended. Loyalty has been redefined, and now, finally, all of you is moving in the same direction. Before life has the chance to give you anything, you often take it away from yourself. This is the silent, corrosive habit Owen Hermstring calls autorejection, one of the most self-sabotaging yet common behaviors people carry. In The Law Behind the Laws, Hermstring unveils this invisible mechanism as a primary reason why success never feels real, sustainable, or even deserved for many people. You say no to yourself before life can, he writes, because being rejected by yourself hurts less than being rejected by the world. But what drives someone to reject their own potential, their own truth, their own dreams? At the core of autorejection lies a fragile contract between fear and control. If you believe that you're not good enough, not ready, or not worthy, then rejecting yourself before someone else does gives you a false sense of safety. It's a way of managing disappointment before it happens. You're trying to cushion the fall by never allowing yourself to jump. Hermstring puts it this way: autorejection is a preemptive wound. You hurt yourself so no one else gets to. Let's say you're invited to speak at an event. Your name is brought up for a promotion. Someone compliments your creativity. What's your first instinct? If you shrink, deflect, or downplay, pay attention. That's autorejection. It's not humility. It's fear dressed as modesty. It's the inability to receive without suspicion or guilt, because deep inside there's a belief: if I take this, I'll lose something. Whether that's love, approval, safety, or the illusion of control, it's powerful enough to keep you stuck. Hermstring emphasizes that autorejection rarely shows up as a loud no. It's quiet, subtle. Sometimes it sounds like, maybe I'll do it next year. They probably just feel sorry for me. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. It's already been done by someone better. These are not thoughts. These are protective rituals. You're not just doubting. You're preserving a version of you that never risks being exposed, because if you never truly try, you can never truly fail. If you keep playing small, you'll never be called out for trying to be big, and so your life becomes a loop of unexpressed potential, a museum of dreams deferred, not by the world, but by you. In one chapter, Hermstring shares a revealing metaphor. You're not locked outside the gates of success. You're the one holding the key and walking away. This imagery is haunting because it's true. So many people live at the edge of their possibility, not because life denies them, but because they quietly deny themselves. But where does this habit begin? Often, autorejection is learned. It's modeled by caregivers who never claimed their worth. It's born in classrooms where praise was rare and criticism abundant. It grows in environments where confidence was called arrogance, or where mistakes were punished, not explored. And slowly, you begin to internalize a dangerous idea. It's safer not to try. It's safer not to be seen. Hermstring also explains that autorejection becomes a coping mechanism for unresolved shame. Shame says, I am wrong. And if you believe that, then good things don't feel like blessings, they feel like accidents. You distrust them. You wait for the other shoe to drop, so you drop it yourself. You sabotage. You procrastinate. You walk away just before the breakthrough. All because you don't want to be exposed as someone who didn't deserve it in the first place. In a striking passage, Hermstring writes, "You're not afraid of failure, you're afraid of being seen trying." Because trying implies you believe you matter. This hits hard. Trying requires vulnerability. It says, I believe this is possible. And if that possibility is rejected, it cuts deeper. So auto-rejection becomes the armor. But it's heavy. It keeps you hidden, numb, and unfulfilled. So how do you shift it? The first step is awareness. Start noticing your language. How often do you downplay your efforts, your talents, your impact? How quickly do you withdraw when things get real? How often do you say no to opportunities before even exploring them? The second step is rewriting the narrative. Hermstring encourages readers to stand witness to the moments when life offers you something and practice saying yes, even when it feels undeserved, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. Because healing is not just about fixing pain. It's about expanding your capacity to receive. And auto-rejection is a ceiling on that capacity. Another key practice he offers is the mirroring exercise. Every morning you look at yourself in the mirror, not to affirm with empty words, but to speak the truth you've been avoiding. You say, I am not broken, I am allowed to try, I am allowed to want more, I am safe to be seen. You don't say these things because you fully believe them yet. You say them to interrupt the loop, to create new pathways, to offer your nervous system something else to trust, because ultimately the habit of auto-rejection is not about truth, it's about training. You trained yourself to reject, but you can retrain yourself to receive, to expand, to take up space, to allow, not in arrogance but in permission. The final message Hermstring leaves is simple but radical. The world doesn't need you to be humble, it needs you to be whole. And being whole means not abandoning yourself before life even has a chance to respond. It means staying in the room, saying yes, and letting yourself be chosen, not just by others, but by yourself first. There is a cruel paradox that Owen Hermstring addresses head-on in The Law Behind the Laws. You may be consciously focused on what you want, but still attract exactly what you don't. It's not because the universe is broken, it's because your intention is fragmented. A divided frequency, Hermstring writes, delivers a divided result. You get one thing with one hand and simultaneously sabotage it with the other. Let's unpack that. You say you want a fulfilling relationship, but secretly believe you're not lovable. You say you want financial freedom, but your nervous system still sees money as danger. You say you want to be seen, but flinch at the thought of visibility. These are not contradictions at the logical level. They're contradictions at the energetic level. And as Hermstring emphasizes again and again, the law behind all laws is this. You manifest not from your surface focus, but from your deepest frequency. Fragmented intentions happen when your conscious desire and subconscious beliefs are pulling in different directions. Imagine trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. That's what most people are doing with their dreams. They affirm one thing in the mirror, and then doubt it in every micro-expression, every choice, every feeling they suppress. And then they wonder why nothing moves. In one of the most revealing chapters, Hermstring explains this phenomenon through a metaphor. You're trying to order a future while whispering regrets into the past. You are split, and the universe doesn't respond to what you ask. It responds to who is asking. If the version of you making the request is anchored in fear, shame, or lack, the results will reflect that frequency. This is why focus isn't enough. You can visualize, you can journal, you can script out every detail of the life you want. But if deep inside you still feel unworthy of receiving it, your signal is distorted. The life you want can't find you clearly because the coordinates are scrambled. As Hermstring puts it, intention without coherence is just noise. So how do you know if your intention is fragmented? Look at your results. Are you stuck in almost? Are your breakthroughs followed by breakdowns? Do opportunities slip through your fingers just as you get close? That's not bad luck. That's mixed energy. You may be thinking you're aligned, but feeling, believing, and acting as if you're still unsafe to have what you're asking for. Hermstring offers a painful but powerful exercise. Write down your biggest desire. Then, underneath it, write your honest answer to this question. What bad thing might happen if I get this? You'll be surprised by what surfaces. You might want love, but fear abandonment. You might want money, but fear responsibility. You might want success, but fear being envied or isolated. You might want freedom, but fear losing structure or discipline. These are the fractures. These are the unspoken contracts you've made with fear, and no amount of visualization will override them. Not until they're brought into awareness and integrated. One client story Hermstring shares is about a woman who wanted to start a business. She had the skills, the ideas, the capital, but kept procrastinating. Every time she got close to launching, she'd distract herself with something else. When they explored her deeper beliefs, she realized, if I succeed, I might outgrow my partner, and I'm afraid of being alone. Her subconscious was protecting her, not from failure, but from success. Because success threatened her current identity and attachments. Once she saw that, everything changed. Her energy became clear. She stopped pushing and started allowing. That's the key. Clarity isn't just about knowing what you want. It's about cleaning up everything that resists it inside you. Your inner alignment must match your outer intention. Otherwise, you're just sending a distorted signal out into the field, and the field mirrors that confusion back to you. Hermstring uses the term energetic congruence to describe the state where your desire, your belief, and your emotional readiness are in full agreement. That's when things move. That's when what you want starts wanting you back. Not because you forced it, but because you became a clear channel for it. So how do you move from fragmentation to congruence? First, you have to listen. Not to your affirmations, but to the quiet resistance underneath. The voices that say, it's not safe. It's not time. You're not ready. Don't argue with them. Don't override them with positivity. Sit with them, honor them. Ask them what they need. Because those voices aren't your enemies. They're younger parts of you that once learned rejection, pain, or betrayal. And they're still holding on to protection patterns that no longer serve you. Second, you need to practice energetic rehearsal. Not just imagining what you want, but feeling safe to receive it. This means letting your body acclimate to joy, wealth, attention, visibility, intimacy, whatever your goal includes. If you've lived without these things for years, Your nervous system might see them as threats, not blessings. You must teach your system that it's safe to expand. Finally, you must choose coherence over urgency. When things aren't flowing, don't push harder. Ask where your energy is divided. Ask what part of you is still scared. Ask if the person making the request is ready to become the version of you who can hold the result. Because ultimately, you don't get what you want. You get what you are. Not the surface version, but the deep, vibrational truth, humming beneath everything you say and do. And when you align that truth, when your intention is no longer fragmented but whole, the universe doesn't just respond. It resonates. You've meditated, you've journaled, you've forgiven, you've even done the inner child work. And yet, despite all your healing, the same patterns keep showing up. The same arguments in relationships, the same financial ceilings, the same self-sabotage at the edge of a breakthrough. Why? Because as Owen Hermstring says in The Law Behind the Laws, you might have healed the wound, but you left the code running. This is one of the most unsettling truths Hermstring confronts his readers with. Healing is not the same as reprogramming. You can cry over your past, forgive your parents, even rewrite your story. But if your nervous system is still wired to expect pain, rejection, or failure, then your life will reflect the same loops over and over. The loop doesn't care about your insight. It only responds to your frequency. So who's really in control? If it's not your conscious mind, not your willpower, not even your healed version, then what is? According to Hermstring, the answer is blunt. Your unconscious operating system. The part of you formed by repeated experiences, emotional shocks, cultural conditioning and generational beliefs. It's not evil. It's not broken. It's simply efficient. It runs the script that it believes keeps you safe, even if that script keeps you stuck. Hermstring explains that most people are living under phantom programming, emotional reflexes installed decades ago that no longer serve the present version of themselves. A child who learned that being quiet meant staying out of trouble becomes the adult who freezes in conflict. A teen who was bullied for expressing emotion becomes a man who shuts down in intimacy. A girl who felt unsafe when praised becomes a woman who minimizes every success. These behaviors aren't conscious. They're embedded, and until they're reprogrammed, no amount of mindset work can override them. One of the book's most impactful metaphors is this: you've changed the furniture in the house, but the wiring behind the walls is still faulty. That's what most personal development misses. It beautifies the surface, positive thinking, vision boards, even therapy, but leaves the root circuitry untouched. And when the lights flicker again, when your life short-circuits in a moment of pressure or vulnerability, you blame yourself. When in reality, the old program was simply still running in the background. Hermstring argues that reprogramming isn't about repeating affirmations. It's about interrupting emotional reflexes in real time. It's when you catch yourself going into shutdown, avoidance, control, or overgiving, and choose consciously to do something different. That choice creates friction, but it also creates freedom, because every time you interrupt the loop, you rewire the circuit, not instantly, but incrementally, until your default reaction becomes a conscious response. Let's take an example from the book. A man named Aaron, successful on paper, but plagued by a deep fear of being truly seen. Every time he got close to love, he'd disappear. He thought it was a fear of commitment. But Hermstring helped him trace it back to an early childhood memory, being punished for crying in front of others. I learned that vulnerability meant humiliation, Aaron said. So, even though he believed in love consciously, his body equated intimacy with danger. Aaron had done the work. He forgave his father. He wrote letters to his inner child. But none of it changed the automatic shutdown he felt in moments of closeness. Why? Because the emotional reflex was still active. His healing was intellectual but not neurological. Hermstring guided him through a process of embodied rewiring, feeling the shutdown impulse, breathing through it, staying present, and then speaking the truth anyway. Little by little, Aaron didn't just heal, he reprogrammed. He gave his nervous system a new instruction: it's safe to stay. And that, Hermstring says, is the moment the law behind the laws begins to shift. This is why self-awareness alone is not enough. You can know why you do something and still keep doing it, because awareness doesn't change programming. Experience does. You have to live a different choice, again and again, until your body believes what your mind already knows. And here's the twist. Sometimes the deeper programming pretends to be healed. It puts on a spiritual mask. It says, "I've moved on," but behind the scenes, it's still orchestrating avoidance, perfectionism, or hyper-independence. As Hermstring warns, the ego evolves to protect the wound more elegantly. That's why real reprogramming requires radical honesty. You have to look at your current patterns without spiritual bypassing, without justifying them, without sugarcoating them as boundaries or intuition, when they're really fear in disguise. Reprogramming also requires new relationships, not just with people, but with your identity. Who are you when you're no longer ruled by survival coding, when you're not trying to avoid rejection, abandonment, or failure? That version of you, the one beyond the programming, is unfamiliar, which is why most people unconsciously return to what's known, even if it's painful. Hermstring writes, "Freedom isn't just the absence of pain, it's the willingness to live without the script that once kept you safe." That's the true work, not to eliminate fear, but to stop letting fear write the code, not to escape your past, but to choose a future that doesn't look like a repetition of it. So who's really in control? You are when you pause the reflex. You are when you reframe the story. You are when you rewire the response. You are when you live as if the new program is already true. Because in the end, the law behind the laws doesn't respond to what you hope is real. It responds to what you embody as real. And when your nervous system, your choices, and your identity align with that, the old script loses its power, and you finally stop living on autopilot. There comes a point in every transformation journey where the truth becomes unavoidable. You're not here to keep patching up your old system. You're here to build a new one. Owen Hermstring calls this the programmer's crossroad. It's the moment when healing is no longer about recovery, but about authorship. You stop being the user of the system, constantly surprised by its responses, and become the coder of a new internal language, a language that obeys your soul's vision, not your subconscious past. But how do you even begin to build a new internal operating system? Hermstring is clear. You don't just change what you believe, you change how you process reality. Your operating system is made of default filters, the way you interpret feedback, the emotional meanings you assign to silence, attention, success, rejection, and rest. Your reactions aren't random. They follow invisible instructions written years ago. Becoming the programmer means rewriting those lines of code, one decision at a time. The first step, Hermstring explains, is to identify your core operating assumption. What's the invisible rule your system follows? For many, it's, "I'm not safe unless I control everything." For others, "I don't matter unless I prove myself." These aren't conscious affirmations. They're emotional reflexes coded by experience, and they silently run every choice, every expectation, every self-concept. Once you've found that core assumption, the next step is interruption. You must interrupt the process that confirms that assumption. Hermstring teaches a three-step technique: pause, pattern, pivot. First, pause when the emotional charge appears, the tension, the urge to react, the story rushing to the surface. Second, identify the pattern. What emotion is this triggering? What old meaning is trying to replay itself? Third, pivot, not by denying the emotion, but by choosing a new action that belongs to the identity you're building, not the identity you're shedding. Take, for example, someone whose core assumption is, "I'm only worthy if I'm useful." When a friend doesn't respond to a message, the old code activates, "I must have done something wrong, I should offer help to feel valuable again." But the new system requires a pivot. Pause. I notice the urge to overgive. Pattern. This is the old need for external validation. Pivot. I'm going to let the silence be neutral and keep my energy grounded in self-worth. This isn't easy. As Hermstring warns, you'll feel like you're betraying your old self, because in many ways, you are. You're breaking loyalty with the identity that once protected you, but that's the only path to authorship. You cannot serve two scripts, the one you were given and the one you choose to write. To reinforce this shift, Hermstring suggests creating code-level declarations. These aren't fluffy affirmations. They're functional scripts, new commands that instruct your system what to do when the old programming tries to boot up. For instance, instead of "I am confident," say, "When fear arises, I slow down and breathe into truth." Instead of "I am abundant," say, When lack appears, I remember what I already embody. Instead of "I am loved," say, "When I feel unseen, I choose to witness myself fully first." Each declaration includes a trigger plus response plus embodiment. That's what reprogramming really is. Not words you repeat, but choices you live at the moment of the old loop. Another vital piece Hermstring emphasizes is environment. You cannot build a new system inside a machine coded for chaos. Your physical space, your digital feed, your relationships, they're all extensions of your subconscious field. If your room reflects confusion, your nervous system will resist clarity. If your calendar is packed with obligations, your mind will reject stillness. Becoming the programmer means protecting the container where your new system is being installed. There's also the power of reverse integration. Instead of always trying to fix the past, Hermstring teaches you to pull your future self backward. He asks, how would the version of you who's already free live this moment? Walk through this fear? Speak into this tension? The point isn't to fake it, it's to anchor into a higher code that's already written in your field of potential. The more you choose from that version, the more your current system updates in response. Over time, something magical happens. You stop fighting your old identity and start building in favor of your truth. You no longer live to avoid pain, you live to express alignment. The echoes of old wounds may still whisper, but they no longer issue commands. You've changed your inner hierarchy. The programmer is now in charge, and with that comes a deep responsibility. As Hermstring writes, the most dangerous lie is not the one someone told you. It's the one you keep repeating to yourself because it feels familiar. Becoming the programmer means refusing to repeat that lie, even when it feels comforting, even when silence is safer than truth, even when shame disguises itself as humility. You speak the new code. You live the new law. The final message from this topic echoes the book's central premise. You are not here to be a servant of your past. You are here to become the author of your alignment. And that alignment doesn't come from force. It comes from consistency, repetition, conscious practice, and most of all, the courage to say, every day, I don't live by the old program anymore. I write the new one, and it starts